Hey everyone, welcome to Get Freight to It. I'm your host, Chris Arredondo, co-founder and head of pretty much everything customer related here at Cargo Chief. In our series and upcoming episodes, you'll hear from not just our partners and TMS companies, but also insight and brief discussions with some of our customers here at the Chief, covering unique topics in the logistics industry. I think from slinging freight, tips and tricks, new products, whatever it is under the sun that impacts this industry, you name it, we'll talk about it. So join us every Wednesday as we sit in and get freight to it. So for those that haven't heard of Cargo Chief, we're a freight tech company that solves some of the biggest issues when it comes to not just capacity, but sporadic capacity, and not just rating, but the inaccuracies and volatility of the market that I think we've all come face to face with, especially these days with all the inflation that's going on. So how we do that is through our project and procurement software called C4. If you're looking to expand your carrier base and book more freight, then we should probably talk. So today we have Jeremy Thone with us, marketing director over with 3PL Systems. We'll be getting into load boards versus capacity management, what they're hearing from customers, what's new, and a little bit more about Brokerware, their TMS. That's I believe built on streaming your business and simplicity, kind of all in one single portal. So it's pretty cool TMS. Jeremy, welcome to our show. I've seen you do a little bit of podcasting called, I think it's 3PL Live, yeah?
Yeah, 3PL Live, definitely. Thank you for having me on the show, Chris. Yeah, I started 3PL Live about 2 years ago, actually. Had some pretty interesting guests on the show. We've had like Craig Fuller. We did his founding story of how he started FreightWaves and how his family is actually all super connected. I think one of his family members owns Covenant and the other one's US Express. So with the two of those companies alone, they employ several thousand, tens of thousands of people within the industry. But yeah, the podcast really started as a way to like kind of, I really realized that digital marketing was really getting popular and content creation and kind of creators were building these kind of ways of doing things differently in the market. And I actually really came across it through this thing called like they call it dark social. And I was posting stuff actually a few years back ago about like sales content. And it was interesting because one of my old bosses that hired me didn't engage with any of the content. It was like sales tactics, like how to use like pattern interrupts. And he basically took a screenshot of this marketing material and he shared it with the sales team. And I just realized the power of LinkedIn and of stuff that wasn't really being, measured through attribution. So that's kind of how I started 3PL Live.
Interesting. Yeah, it's like podcasts are kind of all out there. A lot of people are doing it, like kind of what we were talking about earlier, content. Like a lot of people are pushing content. And I think, just with a freight tech company, like that's kind of one of the areas that a lot of people fall short on. It's like, oh, we don't have the time for it yet. Let's do it later. But it's like really a good way to kind of increase that brand awareness. And, I think with you, we'll be wrapping up our integration there with 3PL Systems, TMS Brokerware here at the end of the month, kind of the end of June, early July. So where you can kind of get our full experience from capacity, procurement, our rating engine, automation with digital freight matching, all in one subscription there in Brokerware TMS. So let's get freight to it. Load boards, right? Versus capacity management and procurement. I saw an article the other day from some supply chain group there on LinkedIn. I kind of laid out the specifics between procurement and purchasing, which I thought was interesting to see because me having Cargo Chief having like a procurement software, it obviously caught my eye. Where they kind of explained procurement was more or less the process, where purchasing was kind of the transaction. I think they explained it like buying a car. Like buying the car was like the procurement part was the research, which brand you're going to get, just everything that kind of goes in before you actually like buy the car. And the purchasing side was physically going there, handing them a card or signing the paper and purchasing the car, right? So I kind of like to explain procurement in this industry, kind of like project management. If you think of like a project manager that's building a new apartment complex, a lot of times they're looking at somebody to lay the floors, somebody to do the landscaping, somebody to put up the walls, and just different bids all across, different contractors, different roles, different jobs, but also pricing too. Like they're not just going to go and just sign off with the first guy and go with that. Like they're probably pricing raw materials. What is the market at? Like slats or to put up your fence, like lumber, I think last year or a year and a half ago was like outrageous. And I wasn't able to repair my fence because my project manager guy was like, hey, lumber went up like 200%. I'm like, I'll just wait till the HOA gets me. So it's still there. And I think like when you think about like that project management side, different industry, but like when it comes to logistics, I see it kind of similar to load boards being transactional and procurement being that relationship and really process driven. When you're finding your carriers, marrying all these tools, making the process more efficient, and you're improving your workflow to finally like go with the best decision, not just being so transactional like a load board where you're reactive and posting a load and taking the first carrier that fits the bill. So I think with that kind of, Jeremy, how would you explain this whole idea between the two, load boards and then capacity management procurement all in one?
Yeah, I think that load boards were kind of I don't know, early 2000s. I think we mentioned earlier, like on a different call, but like if you look at like the load boards, they were kind of just this way of connecting all these different carriers in the market with like all these brokers or shippers or whoever. And a lot of the times it was like Groundhog Day. They would go in there and they would be like, all right, even though they might already have some of these carriers in their system and they already had a bunch of data that they weren't collecting and managing and organizing before, they were just sort of dumping the data, not using it, and then finding a new carrier every single time, like as if they hadn't been through this process before. So I think that like the way I look at it is that what you guys are doing over there with like C4 is like you're going in there and you're able, it's almost like a CRM or for the carriers where you're able to like store the data for each carrier on like which lanes they went on. And there's basically a trove of data that is not being used. And I think what you guys are doing is you're utilizing that data to basically better digitally freight match a carrier that would have a better probability of actually doing that. And humans aren't really good at crunching, data like that. That's definitely something that's better done for a machine, so that like humans could focus more on relationship building and like reutilizing carriers and things of that nature.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like we just finished our Jacksonville, Florida tour, I guess if you will, with our customers last week there, and what I noticed across all these TMSs and a lot of our customers too, like they all have data. TMSs are a great like data warehouse, but it's only the far and few that like really are able to interpret it in a way that's actionable. I think like, kind of how we serve up capacity is meant to be like to skip that first 2 years of a green rep to where it puts them in the seat to make really good decisions based on a lot of information that we serve up. And I think like when you're thinking load boards, like not much has really changed. I think like, a couple out there and maybe they change their name from an acronym to something else now. And it's like these days at the end of the day, nothing really changed from dialing a truck. It's like, there's the truck, there's the load, and they just both dial each other. Right. So it's like not much has changed since the, I guess, tracking loads instead of using index cards along your desk. Now they have a little bit more tracking capabilities, but as far as when it comes to coverage, there's that the tried and true methods that really work are procurement and like building your relationships. Like I think when you go to a brokerage office or whatnot, or if you've slung freight before, you kind of know what I'm talking about. Everybody has a guy or a carrier. They've got like the top 2 to 3 where all that information is just kind of like tribal knowledge in their head. And there's not anything really beyond that source. It's like, when reps are going to cover their freight, they're looking, I've got a guy 2 to 3 carriers. Let me reach out to those. If they're not available, like there's not really a secondary source to go to. In theory, they'd like to go to historical carriers and call down the list. But by the time they do that, like the phone's probably ringing, dealing with a carrier fall off, and their priority is just kind of out of whack. So resulting them in posting that load, which kind of brings up a lot of risk, right? Like you don't really know who's on the other end. There's not really much information when somebody calls you on the phone. Like my best friend who calls me on my cell phone is scam likely. I don't like the guy, but like he keeps calling me. So I'm like, I just don't answer the phone. So you never know who's going to be calling in on your load. Like it's very hard to verify those types of things. And I think just ways to mitigate the risk is to focus on procurement in that care relationship and really just kind of so you don't have to deal with a transaction, like back to that purchasing sense. Like you really need a lot of information in the work process or the process that you're doing to make a good decision. So I guess, Jeremy, like in the terms of procurement, like what what are you hearing from your customers? I would say those that are on 3PL. Like, do you see a lot more activity like on load boards? Do you see a lot of people wanting to move from load boards? Do you see like what do you kind of see from your customer group there?
I think that there's a little bit of a learning thing that's going on, to be completely honest. I think that people are only familiar with load boards at this point. I think that people have heard of digital freight matchers, but I think that it's still getting to there. I think that people are still realizing that this tool is out there and they're still coming to knowledge of it. Because to me, if I'm a broker and I could, use a load board and have 50 people call me and just completely waste of time versus like using something like Cargo Chief where it's going to go in there and figure out what the best carrier is or the most likely carrier for that lane. I think that's a much better process. And if you also look at like the scalability of it as well, you would think that like tribal knowledge is really important, and it's every company has tribal knowledge, but you guys are essentially digitizing like a tribal knowledge type like a procurement process, which to me I think that like it's just a much better way. I mean, if I was a broker, I would definitely be using tools like this to optimize my time.
Yeah, you said something important there that like not a lot of people know. I know when I was starting my career at CH, right? Like there's your decision makers in the company and leadership. They're probably the ones going to conferences and know what's kind of they're just keeping their eye out for things. But then like, when I started my career at CH Robinson, I had no idea what a freight broker was. Like I was like, what's that? My marketing professor like drew a middleman, like a little stick figure on a whiteboard, and that was it. That's all I knew about it. And it became something like much larger than that. Like a lot of us know how large this industry is. And like even as I went on to my second stint there at XPO, like there was still so much unknown. Like I was only exposed to 2 TMSs at the point when there's so many out there and there's so many brokers, different parts of the country. And it's like they don't. I think when it comes down to the user, they're the ones who are on the load boards. They're the ones who are like trying to decide how I'm going to book freight, because they're probably compensated on like on how many loads they book or how much margin they make, and they're going to go to the process that's probably the one that has worked for them. And if they don't know anything else, then it's like, what else is out there? How could I be doing this better? Like, sure, it may work today, but there's always a better way. There's always a better way to do things, and I think it's like the unknown. Like it's just about the like brand awareness and like getting to the user group, like the people who are actually covering the freight, that can be an advocate and champion to move the business and shift it from that load board purchasing transactional way to more procurement and booking more than one load at a time on the phone. So
yeah, I think it's something that's like an evolution. People probably are taught. I was speaking to some other guy recently that went to some like freight broker school, and he was saying that that's all they teach you is how to use like a load board. They're not really teaching you about these like new tools. And like I think it's like anything. It's like whatever knowledge is passed down from like whoever taught you is sometimes how people stop, and they don't really evolve into much else after that. But if you're constantly searching for how to like optimize your business and become like a better broker, and especially with like Convoy and like Uber Freight, like these guys really need to catch up to that technology, and products like this really help the smaller guys, mid-sized brokers really kind of compete against these other guys, because automation's coming fast. And I think that if you don't kind of catch up in this, you're not going to be much of a broker in the future.
Yeah, right. It's like some of our most successful customers, they don't really automate and integrate just because. It's really like they have a goal in mind. Like for some of them it's culture. Like they really want to change the dynamic whenever they hire somebody else, or like working through the day, like coming in at 8 o'clock, like shouldn't be like faced with all of this chaos. Like whatever you can do, like there's some automation and things out there that can help you, right? It's not just like load boards and procurement. Like there's automation around both of those things that can help mitigate some of that risk and reduce the stress and chaos. So I think it's a good point to the next thing, integrations, right? Those seem to be kind of happening left and right. I see them all over social media and just PR announcements and just different things, customers talking to us about integrations. And not just with you guys, but a lot of TMSs and freight tech companies, right, seem to have kind of throttled up those integrations and trying to push them out a lot quicker. Now, I think too, it's not just like some TMSs take 6 months, 7 months, or whatever, half a year to get an integration going. And I think there's competition there between a lot of TMSs and freight tech companies to see who can get it done the quickest. Because like as a broker, like in just e-commerce and everything, like we've been trained to like, I want it now, I need it now because it's hurting me right now. If I have to wait another 2 weeks, I'm probably going to be shopping, and like I need something now that can do it for me. So I think with, again, our integration will be done here at the end of the month, to kind of put a time to it, I guess. But I guess, what are some other integrations you guys have coming up that's going to help move the needle for your customers in the industry? And I guess what kind of sets you guys there at 3PL Systems apart from the rest of the TMSs out there?
Yeah, I think part of it is just being agile. Like you'd mentioned, like a lot of times, like when you're a big boat, right, it takes a lot to like shift it in any one direction. It's like a very slow move. When you're like a smaller TMS provider, and we've been around for over 15 years, but when you're a smaller provider, we could like really listen. We have a thing called Heads Together, where we get together with our user group. And sometimes it's, the brokers aren't always going to be super friendly and nice about some of the products that they want, but they're giving us feedback constantly. And we're basically taking the feedback that they give us and trying to introduce products to actually help them out. But as far as like integrations go, one it's not necessarily new. It's been with us for really a little over a year, but Triumph Pay, formerly known as HubTran, that one was really great because kind of like what you guys were doing, there was just like a lot of emails being sent to an inbox to do billing for AP. And that process was right for automation. So it went to an email box. And then instead of someone going into the brokerware TMS and then, splicing the document, putting it in there, finding the POD, it managed all that process for you so that the user could focus mainly on the exceptions. And that's a lot of the times how we think about software. We think about like, how easy is it to use? Like, we want it to be super easy, but we also want to like build things that are useful for all of our clients, but then integrate with like the best in class of like stuff like you guys with the digital freight matching programs, and just think anyone that's doing something that we don't necessarily have time to go out there and build like machine learning products necessarily or AI. So it really helps us that you guys are focusing on this one area that's like really useful for our clients. And then we could go in there and integrate with you guys. But being agile is definitely very useful for a smaller company.
Yeah, that's a great point. Cause like, I think as we hear companies switching TMSs, asking for recommendations all the time. And it's like, it's not just really about the integrations that you have, maybe about the ones that you don't have too. And just like from a broker, like, why don't they have that integration? And maybe because it's not the most effective, right? Like maybe it just doesn't fit the bill or that model for that TMS partner. So it's like, I think as a broker, like really thinking about where you need to kind of focus on, is it tasks? Is it capacity? Is it what sort of spectrum it is? And then like kind of thinking about which one's going to help me the most and move the needle the most. So yeah, no, Jeremy, kind of here at the end, thanks again for joining us today. So how can people connect with you? I think last time I asked somebody if they had a MySpace. I don't know if you have one. It's probably not the right way to go in these days, but what should they do? Connect with you on LinkedIn or
connect
what?
with me on LinkedIn, Jeremy Thone, Thone, and 3PL Systems LinkedIn. We post a lot of content on there that's very useful for people. It's conversations like this that enjoyed meeting people in the network.
Yeah. Awesome. Thanks everyone for listening in to our second episode of Get Freight to It. And keep an eye out for more information on our integration here with 3PL Systems and their brokerware TMS. Tune in every Wednesday to get the inside scoop of what's going on. Till then, connect with us, Cargo Chief, on LinkedIn, or check us out at www.cargochief.com. See you next time.
Thanks so much.